Close your eyes for a second. It's sometime in the early 2000s. I'm a law student. It's very late. There's case law spread across every surface of my room. The TV is on in the background because my brain needs something that's not a judicial opinion. And then a movie comes on. The movie is Closer, directed by Mike Nichols, starring Jude Law, Clive Owen, Natalie Portman, and Julia Roberts. The scene is Natalie Portman walking through a crowd in slow motion, and a song starts playing. I stop completely. I put down whatever I was reading because coming through my speakers is something I had never heard before. It was a voice, a guitar, a cello, and the kind of vocal ache that I did not know that music could carry. The song is called Blower's Daughter, and I have no idea who made it or where it came from, but I know immediately, instinctively, that I need to find it. Within months, I'm watching the television show Lost, and it happens again. A different song, same voice, same quality of longing. This song, I later find out, is called Delicate. Now, this was the early internet era. No Spotify, no Shazam. You couldn't hold your phone up to the TV and have your answer in 3 seconds. So I did what people did back then. I dug. I searched, I asked around, and eventually I went online and I got down a deep rabbit hole on a Lost fan page, and I tracked down the name of the song and the artist. The song was called Delicate. The name I eventually tracked down was Damien Rice, an Irish singer, songwriter, and former street busker from County Kildare, just outside Dublin. A man who had left a band, gone to live on a farm in Italy, written songs alone in a vineyard, and was now selling his self-produced album out of the back of his car. I found a way to order that album and have it shipped to me outside of Chicago from Ireland, physically. It was shipped across the Atlantic Ocean, and I think I paid close to $45 for it. And as a broke law student back then, $45 might as well have been $1 million. That was grocery money, textbook money, and train money. I had absolutely no business spending it on a CD, but I did it anyway. And I can say now, confidently, more than 20 years later, it was the single greatest musical purchase of my life. That's why, when we come back, I'll be making the case for Damien Rice's O as the album that makes me feel the most. So if you listen to the podcast, you know about my background and that I spend my days in the law and the executive world. I'm not a music critic. I don't have a degree in musicology. What I do have is decades of living with one album, returning to it through the best and the hardest moments of my life, and an absolute conviction that no other record has ever made people feel as much as this one does. I want to tell you about Damien Rice, about who he is, where he came from, and what he built. And then I want to walk you through O, his debut album, so that by the end of this episode, if you've never heard it, you will go put it on. And if you have heard it, maybe you'll hear it differently. This episode is one I've been thinking about and working on since before this podcast launched last year. I've written sentences and deleted them. I've written entire sections and deleted them because they weren't good enough. And the reason why I held myself to that standard is because of what this album means to me. Because of the thought and the heart and the scar tissue that Damien Rice poured into this record. If you listen to it, you can tell immediately he did not make it carelessly. He lived it. He bled it. And the least I could do was meet that same level of care. So this case is my tribute to what he built. Ladies and gentlemen of the listening jury, let me be clear about what I'm arguing here. I'm not saying that Damien Rice's album O is the most technically complex album ever made. I'm not saying it's the most culturally influential or the most critically decorated. I'm not even saying it's the greatest album of all time because that phrase has been argued to death and it tends to turn into a debate about sales figures and historical impact and who influenced whom. I'm making a different case, a more specific one. I'm arguing that O is the album that makes you feel the most, that no record in the history of recorded music takes you as deep into the full spectrum of human emotion. Longing, desire, regret, tenderness, fury, heartbreak, grace, not in fragments, not in single songs, across its entire runtime, from the first breath of Delicate to the last note of Silent Night buried in the silence at the end of the album. There's a writer and an actor named Josh Radner. If you've ever seen the TV show How I Met Your Mother, he plays the main character, Ted Mosby. Josh Radner is a big-time music fan, and years ago he wrote a love letter to this album on the website The Rumpus that reads like it was ripped out of my heart. He described the first time he heard Damien Rice as a genuine stop what you're doing moment, a voice so achingly sincere that it called something forward in him. He went on to see Damien Rice play 8 times in a single year, calling those shows quasi-mystical and heart-opening experiences. That's not fandom. That's what happens when an album reaches past the part of your brain that evaluates music and it grabs onto something deeper, something you didn't even know was exposed. For Josh Radner, and for me, that's what O does. It finds the feeling you thought you'd buried and holds it up to the light, and it does so more completely and more honestly, and ultimately more devastatingly than any album ever made. Today I'm arguing that O, as a complete album, makes you feel the most, and I intend to prove it. Let's walk through the record. There are 10 tracks on O, and what makes this album extraordinary isn't just that the individual songs are emotionally powerful. Plenty of albums have just 1 or 2 songs that hit hard. What makes O singular is the emotional architecture. The way these 10 tracks are sequenced so that you move through the longing, the desire, heartbreak, the bitterness, surrender, and grace in exactly the order you'd actually experience them in a life lived honestly. This is not just a collection of songs. It's a thoughtful and deliberate emotional journey with a stated beginning, middle, and end. So let me walk you through it. Delicate opens the album like a confession whispered across a pillow. Damien Rice's voice rises and falls with the strings, the quiet first half giving way to a painfully passionate ending that tells you exactly what this album is going to demand of you. It's him saying, "Here is all of it, and I'm not holding anything back." Volcano follows, and the temperature drops. This is the sound of 2 people sitting across from each other while the ground crumbles underneath them. It's dark, eerie. The cello is played by the extraordinary Vivian Long, and it doesn't just accompany the song, but it inhabits it. You've been in that room. You know what that silence between words sounds like. Damien Rice puts it on record. The 3rd track is The Blower's Daughter, and that is a song that stopped me dead, as I mentioned earlier. It's obsessive. Circling, refusing to let go, it's the sound of a man who can't stop loving someone he knows he should release. It opened the film Closer, a story about the devastating things people do to each other in the name of love, and that pairing was no accident. The song and the film understand the same ugly truth, that love at its most intense is also love at its most destructive. Anyone who has ever lost someone and couldn't stop reaching for them knows this feeling, and Damien Rice found the exact sound for it. Cannonball is the exhale. After the obsession and the darkness, here is the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone in. A cannonball is explosive and unstoppable, and yet the song is fragile and tender and uncertain. The tension between the enormity of what we feel and the fragility with which we feel it is Damien Rice's greatest gift. It became his signature song for good reason. Older Chests is the quietest moment on the album, and that quietness is precisely what makes it so devastating. It's a meditation on time, on accumulation, and on the weight of things we never resolved. It carries the unhurried quality of a man sitting in a Tuscan farmhouse watching the light change. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it just sits there with you. And the longer you let it sit, the more it gets under your skin. Next, there's Amy. And I need to stop here because Amy deserves its own moment. This is, in my estimation, one of the most emotionally devastating songs ever recorded. It was the 1 track on the album recorded at Air Studios in London with David Arnold producing. And it has a cinematic scale that sets it apart from everything around it. It opens with monks chanting a low, ancient, sacred drone. And then Rice's voice comes in over the top. The contrast is staggering. The timeless spiritual weight of the chanting underneath this very human, very raw, very present voice tells you immediately this is not a pop song. This is a lament, a prayer. The song builds with a slow, aching performance that most artists don't have the courage to maintain. It doesn't rush. It earns every single feeling it creates. And by the time it reaches its crescendo, you are not listening to a song, you are inside of it. I am arguing that O is the album that makes you feel the most. Amy is the centerpiece of that argument. It finds your unique heartbreak, and it holds it up to the light. Amy is followed by a track named Cheers, Darlin'. It pulls you back from a ledge with something unexpected, dark humor. It's easily the most bitter song on the album. Watching someone you love someone else. Raising a glass that isn't a toast of celebration, but the toast of a man on the outside looking in who hasn't decided whether to feel sorry for himself or furious. Almost everyone who has ever been in love has stood in that exact spot. Rice puts a drink in your hand and lets you stand there with him. Cold Water is where Lisa Hannigan steps most fully forward. And the result is one of the most beautiful vocal interplays on the record. Lisa Hannigan's voice, which is clear and transporting, is the crux that sustains so much of O's timeless quality. The song feels like the moment just before the surrender. You feel it in your chest before you understand it in your head, and that's the mark of a truly great song. I Remember arrives near the end like a final confession, the thing that's been circling beneath all the other songs finally rising to the surface. The production is raw. It's uncomfortable, and it's intentionally so. You can hear the strain in it. You can hear the effort. That refusal to sand down the rough edges and make it easier to listen to is exactly what makes it so powerful. And then, track 10, which is not one song, it's 3. Separated by stretches of silence, tucked inside of each other like nesting dolls. First, Eskimo, sparse, conversational, playful on the surface, and then devastating underneath, because you realize the lightness has been a shield the whole time. Then there's silence, and then if you're patient, Prague emerges, cinematic, aching, enormous. The emotional conclusion the whole album has been building toward. You have to earn it with patience, and some things only reveal themselves when you're willing to be still. And finally, Silent Night. Just Rice's voice, stripped down to almost nothing, offering something ancient and gentle. After everything this album has put you through, he leaves you with grace. It is a remarkable artistic choice, and it lands every single time. That's the emotional architecture of this album. It doesn't just make you feel one thing, it takes you through everything, and it does it in exactly the right order. Now I want to raise an objection to my own case here. If you're listening to this, you may be asking, Matt, aren't you just describing a personal experience? You're describing what this album does to you as an individual. How can you claim it makes anyone feel the most? What about Radiohead or Nina Simone? What about people who listened to O and felt nothing? Listen, there's no objective measurement for emotional depth. I can't hook you up to a machine and prove that O moves the needle further than OK Computer or I Put a Spell on You. Music is subjective, and I know that. But here's what I'd say. The albums that typically get called the greatest of all time, Revolver, Nevermind, they earn the status through a combination of technical innovation, cultural impact, and critical consensus. Those are real and legitimate measures, no doubt. But they are measures of influence. They are measures of importance. They are not measures of feeling. O operates on a different axis entirely. It's not trying to change the course of music history. It's trying to make you feel less alone. And the evidence that it succeeds is everywhere. My brother Rob, whose musical taste I respect more than anyone's, counts Damien Rice as his all-time favorite artist. Josh Radner saw him live 8 times in 1 year. This particular album has been featured in over 37 television shows and films. Not because it's trendy, because when a director needs a song that will make an audience feel something real, this is where they go. That's not nostalgia talking. That's a record that has reached into the lives of an enormous number of people and found something true. And yes, I found this album during a specific period of my life when I was exhausted and searching, and maybe I was more open to being cracked open by music than I had been ever before. I won't pretend the circumstances didn't amplify the impact, but the greatest art meets you where you are. That's not a weakness of the argument, that's the entire point. The album that makes you feel the most is the one that finds you at your most human and says, I know exactly how this feels. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, here is what I know about Damien Rice's debut album. He recorded the album on a mobile studio in houses and homes across Ireland and Paris. These were real lived-in spaces, not sterile recording environments. He funded it with a $500 loan from his father. He sold early copies out of his car. He was not chasing fame. He was not chasing a deal. He was just a man who had something to say and refused to say it in any other way than completely honestly. The production sits somewhere between pub busker minimalism and seismic grandeur. Rice and Hannigan's voices, together, unfolding in real time on record, was the human element that made these songs stand apart from every other singer-songwriter of that era. I spent $45 on this album as a broke law student. I had it shipped across the ocean. I have listened to it hundreds of times over the last 2 decades. I've seen Damien Rice live in Chicago more times than I can count, and every single performance has been extraordinary, because he's a musical virtuoso who conveys heartache and pain in a way no other artist ever has for me. I have carried every one of these songs through the best and hardest moments of my life, and every single time, without fail, this album delivers. Some albums change the course of music. Some albums define a generation. Some albums sell 100 million copies and become the wallpaper of a culture. Does something rarer. It reaches into the most private and most protected part of you, the part that you don't show anyone, the part that still aches from the love you lost or the words you never said out loud, and it just sits with you there. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't pretend to. It just makes you feel less alone in that feeling. And no album in the history of recorded music has ever done that more completely than this one. Damien Rice is a genius. O is his masterpiece. It is, without a doubt in my mind, the album that makes you feel the most. Before we wrap up, here's how to take action on this episode, because a great case is only as good as what you do with it. First, if you have never listened to O, put it on tonight. Start with track 1 and do not stop. Do not shuffle. Don't skip. Let it play all the way through, including the silence at the end of the final track, because what comes out of that silence is worth every second of the wait. Second, find your O. Think about the album or the song or the artist that has followed you through your life the way this one has followed me. The one that found you at exactly the right moment and never really left. That relationship with music is worth examining. It's worth honoring. Third, share it. Send this episode to someone who loves music. Send it to someone who doesn't know Damien Rice yet. That's how great art survives and spreads, not through algorithms, but through one person telling another person, you need to hear this. That's my case for today. If this one hit you, I would love to hear about it. Reach out to me directly or post your thoughts with the hashtag #TheCase4 and tell me, what's the album that makes you feel the most? What's the record you'd go $45 and an international shipping fee out of your way to own? I'm always listening. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, whatever your case is, don't be afraid to build it and carry it out into the real world.